Thank you, Diana, for your kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I'd like to thank the International Economic Forum of the Americas for inviting and partnering with Hennian Partners. For those of you who are not familiar with our firm or industry, Hennian Partner is and has been for more than 20 plus years the global leader in investment migration. What does investment migration, citizenship by investment, residence by investment have in common? All these terms simply describe the policies of countries in which foreign person may gain citizenship or residence through a significant capital contribution to the country and their local economy. Today, citizenship by investment has grown into 4 billion plus revenue industry each year, while our residency by investment exceeds tens of billions of dollars each year. There are more than 100 countries that an individual could choose from, but only about 30 of which are active and relevant. And by relevant, I mean that enough people actively express interest and apply every year. Now, our focus at Hennian Partners, our global team of 300 plus employees, in over 35 offices worldwide, focuses on three main business activities. First, we specialize in advising and assisting high net worth individuals and their families with gaining alternative residency or citizenship by investment. Now, here's a bit of statistic for you. During the height of the initial lockdown, in the third quarter of 2020, Hennian Partners experienced an average increase of 45% in general inquiries compared to the same period in 2019. Surprisingly, the most growth globally has been in the US. By late 2020, Hennian Partners had seen a 235% spike in inquiries from US citizens looking for Plan B passports since the start of the pandemic compared to the same period in 2019. Now, moving on to our second line of business, we also have a successful government advisory practice in which we advise countries on assignments ranging from strategic consulting to assisting countries in the design, implementation, and review of their immigrant investor program. In fact, the concept of residence and citizenship planning was created by Hennian Partners in the 90s, and as globalization has expanded, residence and citizenship has become topics of significant interest among an increasing number of internationally mobile entrepreneurs and investors. We believe every person should have the control to define their future and experience the freedom and peace of mind that dual citizenship and/or residence has to offer. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker, Anthony Scaramucci, who is the founder and managing partner at Skybridge Capital, who shall be interviewed by Jimmy Warren, who is a political analyst at CTV News. Thank you very much, and over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much. Anthony, it's great to have you here at the World Strategic Forum. Normally, I'm not too nervous or invested in the person I'm interviewing, but I'm a former spokesperson for a mayor and a premier. You're a former spokesperson for president. So, of course, I got to make sure that we all stick together. We do well here.
Hopefully,
right?
You lasted longer than 11 days with the mayor. I mean, I'm hoping that was the case. In which case, you probably deserve a gold watch. I didn't get a gold watch on my way out of the White House.
There we go. Well, you've done a great job and successful, great career with Skybridge Capital, in which we're here to talk about. And so, of course, you handle cryptocurrencies differently than foreign currencies, and you have that sort of. It's been an interesting phenomenon. How do you expect, or how do you think we should understand cryptocurrencies for the future?
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you all for having me here. I think one of the things we have to think about, we're talking about investing for the good I just want you to imagine if we're right about the blockchain and the powers of the blockchain, it'll ultimately be this very large delayering technology. And so let me just take you back to our parents. They got in their cars. They were emitting carbon. They headed over to the bank. That bank had to get heated up in the winter, cooled off in the summer. And then, of course, the teller had to drive over there in he or she's carbon emitting car. And then everybody waited online to do a transaction. And maybe they had a teletype that stamped a passbook and they left. Today, because of technology, we can do our banking over the telephone or over the computer, but we're still using a third party. Imagine someday in the future, because of the blockchain, we can actually have a peer-to-peer transaction with each other where there's no need for a permission-based third party. And I just want you to think about the delayering of that. And I'll just take it one step further. If we're able to use the blockchain to transact in the stock market, right now, if I were going to purchase a stock today, I have to go through 7 different entities before that stock ends up in my account, including the Depository Trust Corporation. But if we could set up an exchange where the exchange was using the blockchain and it was just a peer-to-peer transaction between buyer and seller, it would tighten those spreads, make it cheaper for both parties, and it would also delayer or take out lots and lots of costs associated with it. So for me, I see cryptocurrencies, the blockchain, as a force for good and as a mechanism that is quite eco-friendly if you can see it in the future and take it to the distance of where I think it can become.
So I guess then when you're holding those investments, is it a buy and hold? Is it, when so much social media, these type of mobilization of small investors can really affect, the value or the price. How do you go about then managing those currencies from that perspective?
Okay, so I brought props, and I mean this to everybody that's listening. This is an international bestseller, and if you don't believe me, you can come into my basement. I can show you every copy I had to buy to make it an international bestseller. But if anybody has an interest in this, I'm going to give you my email. It's ascaramucci@skybridge.com. If you want to help me out with my wife, Deirdre, you can email me your address. I'll mail you a copy of this book that I wrote last month about Bitcoin. And I have a very, it's a thin book because I know people's attention spans are quite short. It's about 100 pages, and it elucidates more thoroughly the answer to the question that you're asking me. And so I would offer this up to anybody that wants it. Please help me out with my wife. Help me get these out of my basement and into your hands. ascaramucci@skybridge.com, a free book, free mailing, the whole thing. I'm happy to send it to you. But I think where you're going, I think we need to think about, this is an early adoption story. And so Bitcoin right now probably has 180 million wallets. There's 7 billion people on planet Earth. And so we have roughly 2% adoption, if you think about it. And so any technology that has transformed the world in its early stages was quite volatile. Let's go to Amazon as an example. Amazon.com came public in May 15th of 1997. If you put $10,000 in Amazon on the initial public offering, it became worth $21,140,000 today. However, you would have had to subject yourself and your portfolio to 8 periods of time where it dropped at least 50%, 1 period of time where it went down 85%. And I remember that period. It was 2009. The Barron's Financial News Weekly, on the front cover of that magazine, it said Amazon.bomb, and the age of this internet retailer is over. And of course, Jeff Bezos, this past year, in July of 2021, shot himself into space in his own rocket. So when you have an early adoption technology, Facebook, Google back in 2004, you pick the technology, it has bumps and starts and lots of oscillating volatility in the beginning. But if you're right, my recommendation, I think the best investors among the world-class group of investors have a buy and hold strategy. They don't like selling things of high quality. And so if we're right about Bitcoin, you would sort of weather through the storms of Bitcoin, but recognize that there's huge demand for this. And frankly, there'll be huge global need for this going forward.
So I guess if we look at another sort of buy and hold tried and true investment property, it would be properties, real estate. And so I guess I was in New York City last week. A client has done big renovations, 250 office spaces. They've got their sort of return to work, but it's optional. And there's 7 people in the office all of last week. So I think the pandemic has changed, I guess, work from home, given people's options. I think over time, more people will end up going back to the office. But I do think there's been a fundamental transformation of how people do work and where they do it. And so I'd be curious to know your personal experiences, your thoughts on what you're thinking about real estate as an investment right now, given this change from the pandemic.
Well, I have found that when we write the obituary for real estate, we are forgetting human innovation and human ingenuity. And so we wrote the obituary for the retail shopping mall, and then they figured out how to recreate those and make them more social spaces, and people flooded back to the malls. We've written the obituary on our movie theaters, but it looks like people still like to be entertained that way. Just look at the opening of the James Bond movie recently as an example of that globally. I would say with commercial office space, specifically here in New York, it will return, it will recover. It's going to take a little bit longer. I own a restaurant in Midtown Manhattan with a few partners called the Hunt and Fish Club. And what's happening at that restaurant is we're packed on Friday and Saturday night, and we're partially packed back to old 2019 levels on Thursday. But the rest of the week and our lunch crowd is de minimis. And that's primarily because of what you're saying, Jim. People have not fully returned to work. They're either frightened to return to work, or they're getting a lot of things done at home. But what I can tell you from my life experience, I like working in the office. And again, I'm from a Wall Street culture. We typically work in a bullpen where it's an open office floor, and we're communicating and interacting with each other on a daily basis. Much harder to do on Zoom. I'm not saying that Zoom isn't an attractive option. Certainly, I would love to be there with you guys today, but this is a reasonably good, very attractive option, and it does delayer again, takes out costs and so forth. But I do see real estate coming back, and I do see New York real estate coming back. I might point out to everybody that residential real estate in New York is an upward climb in prices and demand. There's less inventory today than there was 18 months ago. And I like that trajectory. Now, we can all stop here and say, okay, well, what is that really about? Is it about the money supply and the increase of the money supply and the flowing liquidity globally? I think that is also part of it. And I'll just finish off my answer with this 3 sentences I think people need to be worried about. The money supply, the lax increased volume, and let's just put it in perspective, 42% more dollars in circulation today than there were in April of 2020. So in 18 months, we grew the money supply by 42%. So there should be no surprise that there's inflation out there. But here's the worry, myself or yourself or other people that own assets, those assets go up in value as denominated in the fiat currency of the country that we live in. But what about the working class people or the middle class people who are using their time and their energy, their labor to earn income? What we find about their wages is that they cannot catch up to the asset growth. And that's causing a lot of stress and anxiety and tension in the country. It leads to political nationalism. It leads to cynicism for a very large group of people. And we can see across the board, just looking at polling data, issues and debates related to the vaccine. We've lost a good portion of the population. A lot of people are no longer trusting in the system. They don't feel like they're getting a fair shake from the system. So the real estate's going to come back. I think the thing that I'm most concerned about is what are we going to do about middle and lower middle income wages? How do we energize those people that they can feel aspirational about their lives as opposed to economically desperational?
And I think that's not just the United States, across Canada and much of Europe as well. So how do you think the Biden administration is handling the relaunch of the economy? Of course, the reopening, things have not, as we've seen in New York and Florida, places that things are busy, but not at their full. What do you think the Biden administration, how they've handled things? Could they do things differently, I guess?
So the one problem I have is that having been there, and again, I was with President Trump for 11 days, but I actually worked on the campaign for a year. I was also at the XM Bank prior to joining the White House. And it was a life-changing experience for me, Jim, in the sense that I realized how hard these issues are. And so I don't want to be overly critical. I guess the reasons why I came out against President Trump was I thought he was a threat to the democracy, as demonstrated by the January 6th insurrection. There was a lot of evidence and proof to that. My first order with political service and politicians is, are they going to protect the democracy and the 245-year-old system that has been such an amazing system for people like you and me? I grew up, again, in a blue-collar family. My parents didn't go to school. But this system, the decentralization of our government, allows for individual liberty and individual opportunity. So the number one thing for me are these people trying to preserve the democracy and the system. So I give President Biden and his team high marks for that. I would say that they have tried to hit directly the issues related to the science and the public health and safety measures of the vaccine. Again, I brought some props with me, so I'm going to show you one more quick prop. This is Scott Gottlieb's book. I interviewed him for this book last week. It's called The Uncontrolled Spread. If you read the book, you'll learn about all the different mistakes that we made. And again, they weren't just Donald Trump mistakes. There were mistakes made at the CDC, mistakes made at the FDA. We really need to learn from the mistakes we made so we can prevent those mistakes from happening in the future. But this caused incalculable tragedy for the country, not only a slowdown in the economy, but unnecessary deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. So what I would say to you is that they've done a better job, but they're far from perfect. We need to get more people vaccinated. We could end this thing very quickly if we got them vaccinated. We're up against, in our country and throughout the West, very high-grade, weapons-grade propaganda, whether it's from Russia or China. They're really trying to split our country. They're trying to infuse our country with lots of lies and cult-like information and conspiracy talk against the vaccine, which is hurting us. And so I think the Biden administration has done a pretty good job of hitting that stuff head on. You know, as it relates to the infrastructure spending bill and the slate of new taxes coming and the overall economic plan, my guess is that's all going to get watered down. And I would argue that that's also probably a good thing about our system, that no one group can take too much power. But I do think the great thing about the U.S. is because of our decentralization, our great culture of entrepreneurship, once we heal from the pandemic, I think you're going to see very robust economic activity.
That is for sure. And I guess quickly in our last call, how do you see, U.S.-China relationships changing? I guess there's so much economic interdependence when it comes to manufacturing, but there looks like there could be, a realignment of the relationship, I guess, between the West and China.
Well, listen, I think we now have a very good understanding of where the Chinese are coming from and what they're trying to achieve. And it's unfortunately, it's against Western interests. It's against the concepts of Western individualism. The Communist Party of China, probably 90 million people, have a stronghold on 1.3 billion people. And you can see what they're doing to their business leaders, or the concentration camp situation with the Uyghurs, or the situation in Tibet. I think you have to be concerned as an American. Again, I did bring props, so I'm going to show one more book if you guys don't mind. The Wires of War, the Technology and Global Struggle for Power. Jacob Hellberg is a policy wonk, and he's describing in this book that we've got a lot of things going on with China right now that we need to hit head on. Number one, they're hacking our technology. They're taking it out of the federal government, at the Pentagon, all of our great technology leaders. They're trying to steal 30 or 40 years worth of R&D with no regard to property law or intellectual property. Number two, I think it's very clear that they're threatening Taiwan. I can tell everybody that's listening to us today that the United States has no choice. In fact, the Western democracies have no choice but to defend Taiwan. And I'm not just talking about it under the banner of democratic values. Taiwan is the center, the nerve center for semiconductor manufacturing globally. And if mainland China were to get into a military situation with Taiwan and take over the island of Taiwan, I think that would be absolutely devastating to the West, to the U.S., and to the U.S. economy. So I don't like where we're going right now. I want to remain optimistic that cooler heads will prevail. But this is one thing. We're in a very polarized society right now politically, Jim. This is one thing that both the Democrats and the Republicans feel very strongly about. I listened to Biden administration officials give speeches, and it sounds like Trump administration officials as it relates to the bellicosity of rhetoric around China. So we're up against it. I do believe that we will prevail, and primarily because we've got great innovation and great spirit in our economy, and they are stifling that sort of stuff in China. But I am worried about it. I think it's something that if you're not worried about it, get it up on your radar screen, read books like Jacob's book, The Wires of War, and make sure you're starting to calculate that into your investment thesis in terms of how you're putting your portfolio together.
Anthony, thank you so much today for your thoughtful analysis, your thoughts.
Great to be on.
I'm going to email you for 2 books, one for my son as well, so we can all understand Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
And we hope to have you back again at future forums.
Guys, please help me, Jim. Please help me with my wife, Scaramucci at skybridge.com. Please let me get these books out of my house so I can stop listening. And Christmas is coming. Okay, I need to make room for these Christmas ornaments and stuff in the basement. Thank you, Jim.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.